new search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is underway. The Texas-based firm Ocean Infinity is now making its third attempt to find the long-lost plane.
For more than a decade, the vanishing of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 has stood as one of aviation's most haunting riddles.
Where is Malaysia Airlines Flight 370?
Loved ones were left in limbo. Specialists had more questions than answers.
How can you lose a jetliner? How can it vanish in thin air?
And the rest of the world was left to speculate about those final moments. Now, a deep-sea drone surveying one of the planet's most isolated ocean regions has brought something extraordinary to light. Its discovery has stunned researchers and revived lines of inquiry many believed were long closed.
We have done our job, we are ready to release it, and the government said yes, we can release it, so we release it at this point of time.
This time, the trail appears sharper, more defined. In this video, we break down what this new find could finally reveal.
Credible new evidence. Australia, China, and Malaysia have collectively decided to suspend the search.
The high-stakes search that could finally end the mystery. The ocean has a way of keeping secrets. It swallows sound, bends light, and hides evidence beneath layers of pressure and time. For more than a decade, that silence has surrounded Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 that vanished after drifting thousands of miles off course, taking lives and countless answers with it. Despite years of international searches, satellite analysis, and debris washing up on distant shores, the aircraft's final resting place has remained stubbornly out of reach. Until now, maybe. More than 11 years after MH370 disappeared, the Malaysian government has greenlit a renewed search. One last, calculated gamble aimed at the deepest, loneliest part of the Indian Ocean. The mission is being handed back to a familiar name, but one that has evolved significantly since its last attempt: Ocean Infinity. This time, the stakes are clear and unusually bold. Malaysia has agreed to pay the company up to $70 million on a strict no-find, no-fee basis. In plain terms, if Ocean Infinity doesn't locate the wreckage, it doesn't get paid. That kind of deal doesn't just signal confidence, it demands it. Ocean Infinity isn't a traditional search outfit. It's a marine robotics and seabed survey company with operational roots in both the UK and the US, and a reputation built around tackling jobs most crews would quietly refuse. Its specialty? Finding things that really don't want to be found. The company rose to global prominence in 2022 when it played a central role in locating the Endurance, the legendary ship of Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. Lost beneath ice and darkness for more than a century, the vessel was discovered in astonishing condition, a feat many thought impossible until Ocean Infinity's autonomous technology made it routine. That success didn't come from luck. It came from scale, precision, and patience. Three things Ocean Infinity has doubled down on since its first MH370 search in 2018, when it scoured more than 80,000 square kilometers of ocean floor without success. Back then, the technology was impressive. Today, it's something else entirely. At the heart of this renewed mission is Ocean Infinity's fleet of Hugin 6000 autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs. Each one is a free-swimming robot roughly the size of a small car, built to dive to depths of up to 6,000 meters, where pressure is strong enough to crush steel and sunlight has never reached. Each AUV is estimated to be worth at least $8 million, and it shows. These machines don't just wander the seabed, they map it in extraordinary detail. Using a blend of sonar, lasers, optical sensors, and echo sound technology, they create high-resolution 3D images of the ocean floor, revealing shapes, textures, and anomalies that would have been invisible just a few years ago. Despite operating in total darkness, the AUVs see by bouncing acoustic pulses off their surroundings. When something unusual appears, a sharp edge, an unnatural curve, a reflective surface, the drones can switch modes, using lasers to scan what analysts call points of interest, and build detailed models that distinguish metal from rock, wreckage from geology. Once deployed, each AUV operates largely on its own. Operators can give it a simple command: map this area, follow this path, come back when you're done, and the machine handles the rest. It can remain underwater for up to 100 hours before returning to the surface, where its data is downloaded and its batteries recharged before the next descent. As Simon Maskell, professor of autonomous systems at Liverpool University and a former scientific advisor to Ocean Infinity, puts it, you can say, "Make me a map of that area," and it will. But even the best machines don't make this an easy hunt. The Indian Ocean floor is anything but flat. It's a chaotic landscape shaped by millions of years of tectonic violence. Towering underwater mountains, razor-edged ridges, deep chasms, and canyons plunging more than 300 meters straight down. In some places, cliffs rise thousands of meters almost vertically. In others, active volcanoes still reshape the terrain. This is not a very easy place to conduct a search, Maskell admits. You've got to look everywhere. Although parts of the target zone have been surveyed before, experts believe earlier data may be incomplete or too low resolution to catch debris hidden by shadows, sediment, or extreme topography. One of the greatest risks is cruelly simple, being close, painfully close, to the wreckage and missing it because of difficult terrain or gaps in the scan. And then there's the surface. These are very inhospitable waters, Maskell says. It's not where you'd want to go kayaking. Waves can be brutal, the weather unpredictable, and the isolation absolute. Around the clock, crews must analyze incoming data, supervise active AUVS and remotely operated vehicles, recharge returned units, fix failing equipment, and do it all while trying not to get seasick in ludicrously large swells. Technology may do the diving, but humans still carry the pressure. Yet for all the engineering brilliance, Ocean Infinity's leaders know the mission hinges on one deceptively simple question: where to look. You can have the greatest technology in the world, Maskell says, but if you look in the wrong place, it's not going to help you. That's where the new search differs most from the old. Years of additional satellite analysis, drift modeling, and reassessment of flight data have narrowed the focus to a 15,000 square kilometer zone, small by ocean standards, but still vast. Within that area lies what some researchers have come to call the Seahorse Zone, a remote stretch of ocean long suspected to hold the final answer. In early 2025, Ocean Infinity's newest fleet pushed into that zone. The company's flagship vessel, Armada 7806, drifted over waters so deep they felt endless.
This is the vessel trying to solve the world's greatest aviation mystery. Ocean Infinity resupplied in Perth before sailing to a remote slice of the Indian Ocean, the last known satellite ping for doomed flight MH370.
One by one, engineers released the AUVS. Each drone slipped downward at a steady pace, its systems coming alive as it entered a hidden world of ridges, cliffs, and jagged valleys carved by deep time. For hours, the sonar feeds showed nothing but soft, grainy sediment. Just an empty seabed. Then something changed. It's a monstrously big circle, Maskell recalled later. One AUV caught a reflection that didn't behave like rock. As analysts crowded around the monitors, the image sharpened into a long, flat shape, nearly 30 meters in length, half buried in the seafloor, smooth, metallic, and aligned in a way nature rarely bothers with. A second sweep confirmed it. The dimensions were chillingly familiar, comparable to a commercial aircraft wing. The control room buzzed, then went quiet. Everyone there knew the danger of false hope. Over the years, investigators had chased countless illusions, rocks mistaken for engines, shadows that looked like debris. So another drone was sent down, this one equipped with high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar. It passed directly over the target. What came back was different. Ribbed internal structures, torn metal edges, twisted panels frozen in place, unlike anything geological. Within a 15-kilometer radius, the drones detected two more anomalies, one resembling a fuselage section, another consistent with a tail assembly. The findings were classified immediately. Verification protocols kicked in. If confirmed, it would mean the first identifiable wreckage of MH370 had been found, lying in a place no previous mission had ever reached. But before this discovery reignited hope, something else had already shifted the investigation, something that made experts believe, for the first time in years, that the silence might finally be broken. When the ocean finally answered, and technology learned to listen. For 16 long months, the Indian Ocean said nothing. No signals, no wreckage, no hint of where Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 had gone after it slipped off radar and vanished into legend. Families waited, investigators argued, theories multiplied, collapsed, and resurfaced again. The sea, meanwhile, kept its silence, vast, indifferent, and impossibly deep. Then, in July 2015, the ocean finally spoke. It didn't shout. It didn't reveal everything. It whispered. On a quiet morning along the eastern shore of Réunion Island, a man walking the beach noticed something unusual tangled in seaweed near the surf. It was curved, almost 2 meters long, heavy, and crusted with barnacles. Its edges looked chewed and softened, as if the sea had been working on it for a very long time. At first, locals assumed it was just another piece of marine junk, maybe from a fishing vessel or storm debris. The Indian Ocean throws strange things ashore all the time, but this one was different. When aviation specialists arrived, the mood shifted fast. Within hours, the object was identified as a flaperon, a control surface from the wing of a Boeing 777, and at that moment, a sentence many people had quietly stopped believing they would ever hear became unavoidable. Only one Boeing 777 was missing. After more than a year of unbearable silence, the ocean had delivered its first truth. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Newsrooms lit up. Analysts scrambled. Families watched press conferences with a mix of dread and fragile hope. The flaperon wasn't an answer, but it was proof that MH370 had ended in the sea, and that the sea was finally willing to give something back. Engineers examined the fragment in forensic detail. The damage told a story. The hinges showed signs of extreme stress. The metal bore fatigue marks consistent with a violent, high-speed impact with water. There were no indicators of an in-flight explosion. No blast patterns, no outward tearing. Everything pointed instead toward a controlled but catastrophic descent into the ocean. That single piece of debris changed everything. Until then, the search had been driven largely by models and theories. Satellite handshakes, radar arcs, probability zones. Now there was physical evidence. Something tangible. Something that had touched the aircraft itself in its final moments. In Malaysia, the confirmation hit like lightning. Officials spoke carefully, their words measured and solemn. Families cried openly. Grief resurfaced, sharper than before, but this time mixed with clarity. The flaperon was soon flown to France, where investigators at the BEA, the French Air Accident Investigation Agency, began a meticulous forensic examination. Every rivet, every serial marking, every layer of paint was inspected and cross-referenced with manufacturing records. The conclusion was absolute. The flaperon belonged to MH370. Next came the oceanographers. If the sea had delivered this fragment, perhaps it could also reveal where it came from. Using satellite data and advanced computer modeling, scientists began simulating Indian Ocean currents, winds, tides, eddies, and massive rotating gyres that slowly circulate debris across thousands of kilometers. These weren't random drifts. They were long, patient journeys shaped by physics and time. The models suggested the flaperon had traveled nearly 4,000 kilometers from a possible crash site to Reunion Island. Slowly, relentlessly. Like a message in a bottle written by catastrophe. And the ocean wasn't done talking. Over the months and years that followed, more fragments appeared on distant shores. A section of horizontal stabilizer washed up in Mozambique. Interior cabin pieces surfaced in Madagascar. A fragment believed to be part of an engine cowling was found in Tanzania. Each carried its own scars, tears, bends, salt corrosion, each shaped by impact and months adrift at sea. Individually, they were heartbreaking. Together, they formed something else entirely, a fragile breadcrumb trail scattered across half an ocean. Scientists from multiple countries worked together, feeding every new discovery into increasingly complex drift models. Supercomputers ran thousands of simulations, adjusting variables again and again. Wind speed, sea temperature, seasonal shifts, even the Coriolis effect. Slowly, the paths began to converge. They pointed to a narrow corridor of deep ocean southwest of Australia, near an area ominously known as the Seventh Arc. It was a brutal place to search. Beneath the surface lay a tortured landscape of underwater mountains, trenches, and ridges plunging more than 5,000 meters into darkness. For investigators, this convergence was both a breakthrough and a torment. The debris confirmed the aircraft's fate, but the main wreckage, the answers, remained hidden. It was like finding ashes without knowing where the fire burned. Public pressure surged again. Families demanded renewed efforts. Quietly, behind closed doors, private companies began proposing something radical, letting machines do what humans could not. Autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic explorers capable of roaming the seabed for days, mapping terrain far too rugged and deep for traditional sonar to handle. Governments hesitated. The cost was enormous. The odds were unforgiving. But the fragments kept arriving, each one a reminder that the ocean wasn't done with the story. By the end of 2017, the sea had given pieces, but not peace. And then the search entered a new era. For 3 relentless years, the Indian Ocean had defeated every conventional effort to uncover MH370's fate. ships dragged sonar arrays across millions of square kilometers, battling violent seas and brutal weather, only to return with static and shadows. But in 2018, endurance took a back seat to innovation. Ocean Infinity stepped in. They arrived not with a single ship or a single system, but with something unprecedented at scale. A fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs. Sleek, torpedo-shaped machines designed to slip silently into the abyss. Unlike older systems that had to be dragged behind ships at agonizingly slow speeds, these robots roamed freely, guided by onboard computers sophisticated enough to make decisions in real time. Ocean Infinity's agreement with Malaysia was as bold as its technology. It was a gamble. On money, on reputation, and on the belief that machines, properly designed, could finally read the ocean's hidden language. Each dive began with a set of coordinates programmed into a drone's navigation system. Once submerged, the robot vanished into darkness, sweeping the seabed in precise grid patterns. Every sonar ping painted a digital portrait of the ocean floor: trenches, cliffs, plains, landscapes no human had ever seen directly. Back aboard the seabed constructor, analysts worked through the night, studying shapes and shadows that might finally reveal MH370. By the end of the mission, Ocean Infinity had scanned an astonishing 112,000 square kilometers, nearly matching all previous government searches combined. What they found was haunting. Endless, silt-covered plains, deep fissures where sonar vanished into voids. Occasionally, metallic-looking shapes would ignite hope, only to resolve into geological tricks of light and shadow. Hope rose and fell at equal rate, but the machines kept doing what they do best. They kept moving. Although the 2018 mission ended without locating the wreckage, it marked a turning point. For the first time, humanity had mapped vast sections of the deep ocean in detail once thought impossible. And Ocean Infinity didn't stop there. Their AUVs grew smarter with every mission. Artificial intelligence refined search patterns. New generations of machines became faster, more autonomous, and less dependent on constant human oversight. By 2024, that evolution had a name: Armada 7806. This vessel didn't operate like traditional ships. It coordinated multiple AUVs remotely, using satellite links and machine learning to function like a digital hive mind. The drones didn't just scan, they collaborated, adapting their paths based on what others found. The upgraded AUVs carried sub-bottom profilers capable of seeing beneath layers of sediment and side-scan sonar sharp enough to distinguish aircraft debris from coral or rock. They didn't just look at the ocean, they read it. With this technology in hand, scientists refined their models again. The new calculations pointed somewhere even deeper, even harsher than before, a region near a trench ominously dubbed the Seahorse Zone. It was an area previous missions had barely touched, buried under crushing pressure and silence. 11 years after MH370 vanished, technology stood closer than ever to uncovering the truth. What began as a human tragedy had become a machine-driven quest for answers. Somewhere in that dark water, the final chapter of MH370 waited, patient, hidden, but no longer unreachable. But before the machines descended and the ocean whispered its clues, it all began with a routine flight. So let's go back to the very start. The night the sky went quiet. It remains the most haunting aviation mystery ever recorded, not because planes have never crashed before, but because this one simply vanished. No mayday, no wreckage, no clear ending, just silence. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 was never meant to be extraordinary. It was a routine red-eye, one of 2 daily flights linking Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, operated so often it barely registered as news. Yet in the early hours of March 8, 2014, that ordinary flight would slip through layers of technology, geography, and human certainty, and disappear into history. The night began calmly at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The Boeing 777-200ER sat fueled and ready at the gate, loaded with more than 14,000 kilograms of cargo and carrying 239 souls on board. 2 pilots, 10 cabin crew members, and 227 passengers from more than a dozen countries. Most were Chinese nationals heading home. Others were business travelers, students, families, and tourists settling in for a long overnight journey. At 41 minutes past midnight, MH370 lifted off from runway 32R and climbed smoothly into the warm Malaysian night. Nothing about the departure hinted at disaster. The weather was good. The aircraft was mechanically sound. The crew was experienced. For air traffic controllers, this was just another flight sliding into the sky. The first officer handled radio communications while the aircraft was still on the ground. After takeoff, the captain took over. At 46 minutes past midnight, the flight was cleared to climb to 35,000 feet. By just after 1 a.m., MH370 reached its cruising altitude, level and stable, moving northeast toward its first waypoint, IGARI, over the South China Sea. At 7 minutes past 1, the aircraft transmitted its final automated ACARS message, reporting a healthy fuel load of roughly 43,800 kilograms. Everything looked routine, boring even, and in aviation, boring is exactly what you want. 12 minutes later, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control instructed the crew to switch frequencies and check in with Ho Chi Minh City as the aircraft crossed into Vietnamese airspace. The captain responded calmly, professionally, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those were the last confirmed words ever heard from the cockpit. Less than 2 minutes later, MH370 vanished from civilian radar. Its transponder, responsible for broadcasting the aircraft's identity and altitude, stopped transmitting. No distress call followed. No emergency code. No explanation. At first, confusion ruled the moment. Air traffic controllers in Vietnam assumed the aircraft was still under Malaysian control. Malaysian controllers assumed Vietnam had it. Each waited for the other to speak up. When Vietnamese controllers tried to contact the aircraft, there was no response. Another pilot flying nearby attempted to relay a message. All he heard was static and faint, unintelligible mumbling. Something was wrong. At 21 minutes past 1, MH370 disappeared entirely from secondary radar screens used by civilian air traffic control. But the plane had not vanished from the sky. Malaysia's military radar, operating independently, captured something unexpected. The aircraft made a sharp right turn, then swept into a long, deliberate left arc, crossing back over the Malaysian peninsula. It passed over the Strait of Malacca, south of Penang, and continued northwest along established air routes at altitudes between 29,000 and 35,000 feet. Civilian radar at Kota Bharu detected an unidentified aircraft matching the same path. This was no accident. It was a controlled maneuver. By 22 minutes past 2, MH370 reached the edge of Malaysian radar coverage and vanished again, this time into true darkness. From that moment on, only satellites would whisper clues about its fate. Across Southeast Asia, the confusion deepened. Thailand detected an unidentified aircraft without a transponder, but hesitated to release military radar data. Vietnam acknowledged the turn back west, but insisted Malaysia had been informed. Indonesia's early warning systems tracked the plane before its transponder shut off, but saw nothing afterward. Australia's powerful Jorn radar system, capable of seeing thousands of kilometers, was offline that night. In less than an hour, MH370 had slipped through some of the most heavily monitored airspace on Earth. No alarms sounded. No interceptors scrambled. The world had no idea yet, but this quiet sequence of missed handoffs and delayed assumptions would trigger one of the largest, costliest, and most frustrating searches in human history. While radar screens went dark, something stranger was happening above the Andaman Sea. 3 minutes later, nearly 90 minutes after the last ACARS message, the aircraft's satellite communication system suddenly rebooted. It sent a log-on request to an Inmarsat satellite, an automated digital handshake that suggested the aircraft was still powered and still flying. Engineers noticed immediately. To them, MH370 was no longer just missing, it was alive. For the next 6 hours, the aircraft continued responding to hourly satellite pings. It never sent messages, it never answered calls, but it acknowledged the satellite's presence like a ghost drifting across the sky. 2 ground-to-aircraft calls at 2:39 and 7:13 a.m. went unanswered in the cockpit. The final confirmed exchange came at 10 minutes past 8 that morning. Routine, mechanical, unemotional. Then, at 8:19 a.m., one last chilling moment. The aircraft sent another log-on request, consistent with a system reboot, exactly the kind that would occur if the engines flamed out from fuel exhaustion. The satellite acknowledged it, and then, nothing. Around 9 a.m., Inmarsat attempted another ping. MH370 never responded. From those signals, investigators reached a devastating conclusion. The aircraft likely flew until it ran out of fuel, somewhere deep in the southern Indian Ocean. But on the ground, the story was chaotic. Malaysia Airlines Operations Center relied on outdated flight projections and repeatedly reassured controllers that MH370 was fine. Kuala Lumpur did not activate its Rescue Coordination Center until 5:30 a.m., more than 4 hours after the aircraft vanished from radar. Search crews were initially deployed to the wrong sea, combing the South China Sea, while MH370 continued its silent journey far to the west and south. At 7:24 a.m., Malaysia Airlines issued a public statement claiming the plane was missing after contact was lost around 2 a.m.
Well, a new search is underway for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 more than a decade after it disappeared with 239 people on board en route to China.
A time when MH370 was still flying. By the time Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak addressed the world on March 24, the truth was unavoidable. Satellite data showed the aircraft had ended its flight in the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote places on Earth. Families in Beijing were informed in mass briefings. Some received the news by text message. Months later, MH370 was formally declared an accident. All 239 people on board were presumed dead. And yet, the mystery only deepened. Sightings flooded in. Fishermen reported low-flying jets. Oil rig workers described burning objects in the sky. Islanders claimed a massive aircraft roared overhead in the night. None were confirmed. Each added noise, not clarity. As analysts dissected satellite handshakes and radar traces, investigators turned their attention inward, to the cockpit. Malaysian police searched the homes of both pilots. Financial records, digital devices, personal histories, CCTV footage. Nothing suggested stress, extremism, or intent. No unusual transactions, no warning signs. Still, many investigators, particularly in the United States and Australia, believed human intervention remained the most likely explanation. The aircraft had been deliberately reprogrammed. Someone had known exactly how to disable communication systems and redirect the plane into empty airspace. If not a hijacker, then the suspicion circled back to the cockpit. Media reports claimed Malaysian police privately suspected Captain Zaharieh Ahmad Shah. Years later, former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott revealed that senior officials believed early on the disappearance may have been a deliberate act of pilot self-harm, an allegation Malaysia firmly denied. In 2016, the debate reignited when investigators confirmed that a simulated flight path matching MH370's suspected route had been found on the captain's home flight simulator. Authorities insisted it proved nothing. Independent experts disagreed. What investigators could confirm was unsettling. The satellite data unit lost power shortly after the aircraft's diversion, likely due to deliberate action. Malaysia's Prime Minister later stated plainly that the transponder and data systems were intentionally disabled. The reboot at 2:25 a.m. fit perfectly with the aircraft's ghostly turn south. Every passenger was scrutinized. 2 Iranian men traveling on stolen passports initially sparked global alarm, until Interpol confirmed they were asylum seekers, not terrorists. China vetted every passenger and ruled out sabotage. Attention turned to the cargo. Lithium-ion batteries were, on board, a known fire risk, but investigators found no evidence of overheating or improper handling. Aviation experts examined every scenario: hypoxia, electrical failure, uncontrolled glide, pilot incapacitation. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau concluded that an unresponsive crew best fit the evidence, explaining the steady flight, lack of communication, and final fuel exhaustion. Recovered debris later showed the flaps were not extended, ruling out a controlled ditching and supporting a high-speed spiral dive after fuel ran out. And yet, no theory answers everything. Each explanation closes one door and opens another. Now, with possible wreckage emerging from the depths near the Seahorse Zone, those unanswered questions are being asked again, with fresh urgency. Because if MH370 ended in a final uncontrolled plunge, investigators must still determine what, or who, set it on that irreversible path. The night the world lost Flight 370 wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with explosions or alarms. It unfolded quietly, methodically, and far from view. And that silence is what still haunts us. The search that refused to end. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines. Flight MH370 didn't just make headlines. It froze the world in collective disbelief. One moment, the Boeing 777 was cruising through the night sky on a routine flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. The next, it was gone. No distress call, no clear explanation, just silence. What followed became one of the most gripping and unsettling mysteries in modern aviation, spawning documentaries, books, investigations, and endless late-night debates. Even years later, the question still lingers: what really happened out there? In the early hours of March 8, 2014, confusion quickly turned into urgency. At the Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center, the last air traffic control facility to communicate with MH370, the watch supervisor activated the Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center at 5:30 a.m., more than 4 hours after contact had been lost. That delay would later become a point of intense scrutiny. Malaysia Airlines followed up with a media statement 2 hours later, saying authorities had activated search and rescue teams and were working to locate the missing aircraft. At that moment, few imagined just how vast, complex, and unprecedented the search would become. Within a day, the mystery deepened. On March 9, the chief of the Royal Malaysian Air Force revealed that military radar data suggested a troubling possibility. MH370 may have turned back, flying westward over the Andaman Sea instead of continuing toward China. This single revelation blew apart the original assumptions. The initial search area, just 20 nautical miles south of Thochu Island, was suddenly expanded to a 100 nautical mile radius. Soon, search efforts stretched across the Gulf of Thailand and into the Strait of Malacca along Malaysia's west coast. The ocean, vast and unforgiving, was now the prime suspect. Reports of possible debris poured in, each one briefly igniting hope before fizzling out. Oil slicks spotted off the coast of Vietnam were tested, only to be ruled out as aviation fuel. Satellite images released on a Chinese website appeared to show large floating objects, but search teams found nothing when they reached the coordinates. By the end of March 9, the scale of the operation had already become enormous. 40 aircraft and more than 24 ships from multiple countries were scouring the seas. On March 10, the Royal Malaysian Air Force officially confirmed what many feared. Flight MH370 had indeed made a turn back. The following day, China activated the International Charter on Space and Major Disasters, mobilizing global satellite assets to aid the search. By March 12, Malaysian officials announced that an unidentified aircraft, possibly MH370, had been tracked by military radar at 2:15 a.m. over the Andaman Sea, near the edge of radar coverage. The search pivoted once again, and India was asked to assist in covering this newly identified area. What unfolded next was a massive international mobilization rarely seen outside wartime. Malaysia activated its Civil Aviation Authority, Air Force, Navy, and maritime enforcement agencies, while also requesting help under the 5-power defense arrangements. Neighboring nations responded swiftly. Within 2 days, more than 34 aircraft and 40 ships had been deployed. Coordination centers were set up, including a key hub at the National Disaster Control Center in Cyberjaya. By mid-March, the search had expanded into a truly global effort. By March 17th, at least 26 countries were involved, contributing nearly 60 ships and 50 aircraft. The list read like a roll call of the world's major powers and regional neighbors: Australia, China, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, India, Russia, and many more. Even countries not directly participating, such as Sri Lanka, opened their airspace to search aircraft. It became the largest and most expensive search operation in aviation history, and still, nothing definitive surfaced. Experts from around the world were called in. French investigators from the BEA arrived in Kuala Lumpur to share their experience from the search for Air France Flight 447, another tragedy lost to the deep ocean. The United Kingdom provided technical support, while the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization analyzed data from its global network of infrasound sensors, searching for any acoustic trace of the aircraft. Once again, the result was silence. As months turned into years, the search moved south, guided by satellite data analysis that pointed toward the remote southern Indian Ocean. This phase of the operation would be unlike anything before it. Using advanced sonar systems and deep-sea tow vehicles, teams mapped vast stretches of ocean floor at unprecedented resolution. What they uncovered wasn't the aircraft, but something almost as remarkable. The underwater surveys produced some of the most detailed maps of deep ocean terrain ever created. Previously, much of the region had been mapped at a resolution of 1 pixel per 5 kilometers. Now, scientists could see details as small as 10 centimeters. The data revealed towering underwater volcanoes, massive submarine landslides, and dramatic cliff-like scarps rising nearly 180 meters high. Debris fields from ancient landslides stretched for more than 150 kilometers. In a strange twist, the search for a missing plane ended up reshaping scientific understanding of one of Earth's least explored environments. This data wasn't just academically interesting. It had real-world implications. The surveyed regions included geological features like Broken Ridge and the Kerguelen Plateau, both of which may hold oil and gas deposits. Vast fields of manganese nodules rich in nickel, copper, cobalt, and iron were also identified. In March 2017, Geoscience Australia released portions of this data publicly, turning a tragic mystery into an unexpected scientific legacy. By January 2017, after years of searching and mounting costs, the official hunt for MH370 was suspended. The operation had cost between $130 to $160 million. Apart from a handful of confirmed debris fragments found along the African coastline, no trace of the main wreckage had been discovered. For families, the suspension felt less like an ending and more like another unanswered question. Yet MH370 refused to fade from public consciousness. Within weeks of the disappearance, filmmakers and journalists were already trying to make sense of it. Documentaries aired on the Smithsonian Channel, Discovery Channel, and BBC, each examining different theories, technologies, and failures. These programs explored everything from satellite tracking limitations to radical ideas like real-time flight recorder streaming, innovations that could prevent such mysteries in the future. The story even spilled into popular culture and controversy. In 2013, a stand-up joke about MH370 by comedian Jocelyn Chia sparked outrage in Malaysia, prompting a police investigation and an Interpol inquiry. More than a decade later, the flight still carried emotional and cultural weight, a reminder that for many, this wasn't just a puzzle, but a wound that never fully healed. Then, after years of silence, came a surprising announcement. In December, Malaysia confirmed that the search for MH370 would resume. 11 long years after the aircraft vanished, a new 55-day mission was authorized. The operation, delayed earlier by dangerous weather, was framed as a renewed commitment to the families of the 239 people who disappeared that night. For many, it was the first glimmer of hope they had felt in years. After more than a decade of theories, heartbreak, and dead ends, MH370 is once more at the center of global attention. Somewhere in the darkness of the ocean, the truth may still be waiting. Silent, intact, and ready to finally be found. The question is no longer whether the mystery matters. It's whether this time, the search will finally bring answers. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.